To be a fly on the wall behind these closed doors in the courthouse that has seen no shortage of famous, influential, or wealthy criminal defendants. 12 New Yorkers, 7 men, 5 women are right now debating the fate of a former president of these United States, and they have questions. The jury in the historic Trump criminal election interference hush money trial is at this moment deliberating on the 34 felony counts Trump is charged with by the Manhattan District Attorney. Just in the last few minutes, a second note has been sent from the jury. They are asking to rehear Judge Juan Merchan's instructions to them. That's just over an hour from the first note they sent, in which they requested testimony from David Pecker and Michael Cohen. If there are more updates from the courtroom, we've got our laptops open. Our journalists who are inside the courthouse standing watch over this jury as they deliberate are updating us, and we will update you as soon as we know anything. As of 4 p.m., the jury had deliberated for more than 4 hours. That was after yesterday's marathon day of closing arguments, more than 7 hours between the closing argument delivered by the defense and the prosecution. This morning, Judge Juan Merchan delivered those sometimes complicated, kind of weedsy, but all important jury instructions, where Judge Merchan explained how the jurors are to apply the law to these facts in this case. Something that matters in any case, but in this one, where Donald Trump faces felony charges, not misdemeanors, because the allegedly falsified business records were to conceal another crime. The jury instructions took on a new importance. The judge told the jury that they did not have to agree amongst themselves what the underlying crime was. The New York Times reports this, quote, "The jurors did not have to agree unanimously on the unlawful means they might determine that Trump used in the election conspiracy that prosecutors allege took place. Had the judge required them to be unanimous on the unlawful means, it might have become far harder to reach a verdict." The judge went through each and every single one of the felony counts, each one corresponding to an allegedly false record, 11 checks, 11 invoices, 12 vouchers. Judge Merchan explained what needed to be proven to show that Trump falsified these records or caused the records to be falsified. Now, as for the defendant, Donald Trump, he's now forced to wait, just like every other criminal defendant in the country. Any moment now, he could find out whether he'll be asking the American people to send him to the White House with a criminal conviction on his record. He has been spending his time posting a lot of nutty things on the platform Truth Social. Earlier, he said he does not know what he's been charged with, even though they were read to him while he was there. Just before that, he posted a rant from outside the courthouse where he claimed Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. As if Mother Teresa would ever be charged with concealing hush money payments to hide an affair with a porn star. We're sorry we said her name in that sentence. Wait and see mode in the Donald Trump election interference hush money criminal trial is where we begin today with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. With us at the table for the hour, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissmann is back. Also back, New York Times investigative reporter Suzanne Craig. Also back, former U.S. Attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman's here. And once again, outside the courthouse for us, my friend and colleague, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, what's happening right now? I want to look down just to see what's happening inside the courtroom, but I won't do that. I'll let you tell us.
Well, first of all, I'm wondering how many rings of the bell we're going to get here, because it's not clear when the jury from the jury room rings the bell into the courtroom, whether they have a verdict or whether they have a note with questions. And now, so far, they've rung in twice with 2 different notes. The jury, just in the last 2 minutes, re-entered the courtroom, and there were 2 requests from the jury to Judge Merchan. Number 1, there were 4 specific parts of testimony, including from Michael Cohen and David Pecker, that they want to have reread to them. Judge Merchan informing them that it will be about 30 pages of testimony that would require to be read back to them. That could last up to 30 minutes. They are still in the courtroom trying to go and gather those pages of transcripts from all the way back in April to May 13th when Michael Cohen testified. The second request, here's the big one, is to reread the jury instructions that Judge Merchan delivered this morning. Now, to note, this is the packet of jury instructions. Judge Merchan read it once, and it took him an hour and 26 minutes to do so. We've been saying it's complicated, the case is complex, the jury instructions are complex because it pertains to a lot of legal statutes under New York state law. And so now the question that Judge Merchan just put to the jurors is, do you want the whole thing read back to you or just a specific part of the jury instructions? That is what we are waiting to hear from this jury here in this closing hours of day one of deliberation.
So, Vaughn, let me just read back to you the first part of this, which was the first ring of the bell. Is it an actual bell?
We're told by Lisa Rubin that it sounds like a 1960s telephone. So if that takes you back, sometimes government's a little slow to update, but there you go.
Okay, that was my burning question. Now you know more about me probably than you needed to. So these were the 4 questions at the first ring of the bell were the jury expressed they wanted to see. These are the transcripts they're running down. 1, David Pecker's testimony regarding the phone conversation with Donald Trump while Pecker was in the investor meeting. This came up closer to the end when I think the prosecution reminded, it came up maybe in someone's cross, or I don't remember why it came up, but this was Trump on the phone with Pecker. He pulled him out of a meeting, and I think what he said was, I don't pay for stuff like this. This seemed like an important part of tying Trump to the whole scheme, Vaughn.
Right. It's around the Karen McDougal purchasing of the story. He said he was at an investor meeting in New Jersey when he got this phone call. His assistant came in the middle of the meeting and said, Donald Trump is on the line. He stepped out, and he said that's when the phone call took place about the specifics of the Karen McDougal story. And David Pecker testified to this jury that he, in fact, thought the story was real, incredible, based off of the fact that Donald Trump told him that Karen was a, quote, nice girl, and that he urged Donald Trump on that phone call that the story should be purchased. And Donald Trump followed up by saying that he should talk to Michael Cohen, about actually executing that arrangement. Again, this all hits at the beginning of this conspiracy that the jury is having to deliberate over. And we have from the jury instructions that the jury is now asking to be reread to them that Michael Cohen was an accomplice in that. And under New York state law, being an accomplice, you have to have corroborating evidence or testimony. And so that's where it's interesting to see David Pecker, multiple conversations that Donald Trump had with David Pecker, being asked to be reread back to them, that specific testimony, because when you go and match it up, you see some corroborating testimony, not just documentary evidence or circumstantial evidence, but actual testimony that David Pecker links Donald Trump to the beginning of the conspiracy.
Yeah, Andrew Rice, I'm going to ask you to pick up on Vaughn's point. Let me just tell our viewers what's happened in the last 60 seconds. The jury has been dismissed for the day. That was after Judge Merchan brought them back in after they rang their bell a second time. He told them they were going to run down the transcripts of this testimony that Vaughn just described perfectly. We'll tell you what the other 3 pieces of the testimony are that they want. But the jury also wanted the jury instruction read back to them. Andrew, you waved around your packet. As Vaughn just said, the whole thing took about an hour and a half to read. So Judge Merchan asked them to clarify, and I don't know if we have their answer yet, whether they wanted the whole instruction or just part of it. So that's where they'll pick up tomorrow morning at 9:30.
Right. And so this gives the judge and the parties an opportunity to have their ducks in a row so that when the jury comes back, they can be ready to go. Just so that everybody understands, this is a pretty normal part, as Harry knows, of when you have a jury that's out. They can ask for 2 things. One, they can ask to have some kind of instruction reread or some question about the instructions. And for a rereading, it's pretty simple. Once the jury responds and saying if they want the whole thing read back, he can deal with that, or some portion. He just reads that.
I saw in his instruction, he said, I won't give this to you, but I'll read it to you again. Why doesn't he give them a copy?
A quirk? That is a great question. A quirk of New York state law. I was a federal prosecutor. Like this would go back with many of the judges would send it back there. Some judges didn't because they really thought that it might have them sort of parse it too much. But that is something that in other courts, but not in New York. In New York, they can ask to have it read. More typically, they ask questions like, can you please specify some more what beyond a reasonable doubt means? Because that's the level of certitude in your head, how to sort of deal with that, because language is imprecise. How do you sort of convey to somebody what a level of certitude is? So that's a really common question. The other questions, the more interesting one, which is the first note, where there's endless speculation that always goes on as to what does it mean, and you can argue it each way. When I was a prosecutor, I always argued it against me. I always, no matter what note came in, I was like, it's awful. No matter how good it was, no one ever wanted to do trials with me because I was like, we're losing, no matter what happened. So I'm a terrible person
I was
to
like
ask.
that on campaigns.
Yeah, it's so funny. That's what I said this to somebody on Pod Save America, and that's exactly what they said.
Yeah.
I was exactly the same way. It's
Every
very
good
pessimistic.
operative always is certain that they're going to lose.
Yeah.